Okay, so here's continuation, to which I opened up with just in a video, in the videos that I had sent to you guys just regarding my concerns. I opened up with this Habermas discourse theory. One aims to just assumes that the specific type of validity claim one aims to justify, the cognitive goal or topic of argumentation, determines the specific argumentative practices appropriate for such justification. Discourse theory thus calls for a pragmatic analysis of argumentation as a social practice. Ethics is his attempt to explain the implications of communicative rationality in the sphere of moral insight and normative validity. It is a complex theoretical effort to reformulate the fundamental insights of Kantian deontological ethics in terms of the analysis of communicative structures. Truth, legitimacy, comprehensibility, and sincerity. Okay, just forgive me for the quick rundown of this. The discourse principle includes a possibility of advocatory agreements on behalf of those who are not present, since the criterion of normative validity is that in a rational discourse, all those affected could have agreed. Be vindicated in an ideal speech situation, a dialogue that is completely free and uncoerced, in which no force prevails but that of the better argument. So that's just the intro I would like to share before we just kind of dive into this interview.
For FDR, he would look at sensitive information. And now we're at a period where there's another high-stakes war in Europe. You recently said that this is the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that there's a legitimate possibility of someone using a nuclear weapon, which could Armageddon. That's the word you used. That Putin would use. Thank you so much for doing this, sir. Appreciate it.
Happy to.
So for people at home who don't know, this is the Map Room. During World War II, this is where it was basically.
Oops. Sorry.
Basically the situation room for FDR. He would look at sensitive information. And now we're at a period where there's another high-stakes war in Europe. You recently said that this is the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that there's a legitimate possibility of someone using a nuclear weapon, which could lead to Armageddon. That's the word you used. How realistic is it, do you think, that Putin would use
So right there, the wording in his questioning.
Thank you so much for doing this, sir. Appreciate it.
Happy to.
So for people at home who don't know, this is the Map Room. During World War II, this is where it was basically the situation room for FDR. He would look at sensitive information. And now we're at a period where there's another high-stakes war in Europe. You recently said that this is the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that there's a legitimate possibility of someone using a nuclear weapon, which could lead to Armageddon. That's the word you used.
So right there, in my mind, I would logically argue that we are in constant, as a world, when I say we, I mean we as a world human population are in constant threat of nuclear attacks as long as nuclear weapons continue to be allowed to exist in any form, rather it's illegally acquired or permissible, to which is governed by the UN, who, again, the irony of just the fact that we, and when I say we, I mean our country, the United States of America, has no problem saying, like, yes, nuclear weapons are bad, yet feel no hypocrisy in the fact that we stand behind the fact that the world knows we have this stick that we, and when I say we, I mean my fellow citizens, leaders in the 40 years I've been on this earth to witness it firsthand like this is just, it seems that the politicians today, the ones who are manipulating people's true worries and fear of how they're going to survive in this current state of affairs, are just being used as strategy to once again hold office, win office, take over office. This is where it just breaks my heart, sir. And this is where our founding fathers, I feel, predicted this. Because if you're a Nemiscus, you know that our quarter in this cycle, this circulation, 2022, George Washington is facing the other direction. I wish I had the quarter on hand. But this, I just noticed this. You know, these are codes and things that I just felt like with the release of the story of the young boy, I believe in, gosh, maybe Australia or New Zealand, who ended up cracking some code that was left on the 75 anniversary edition. They didn't really, I didn't understand, but I was just like, oh, wow, you know, like, and then he is being offered a job for national security, and everybody's, yeah. So when I heard that, I was just like, okay, Charles, I'm talking to myself, like, maybe you're not crazy. You know, I know I'm crazy, but I just have to tell myself that because I'm at this point where, sir, I feel that the great American experiment, yes, was to really test the boundaries and just the weaknesses and flaws of democracy to improve this system, to which I feel that the best way to explain is what the main man in the New Testament of this book was trying to do. Bring consciousness to the people, especially his apostles, who he's sitting here telling them, one of you will betray me. And then he goes up to the one that he says is going to betray them. And the other apostles just sit there, just, oh, I can't believe Judas is going to do this. They don't stop and run over to Judas like, hey, like, you can't, you know, like, they just accepted it. I can't accept things as easily as my fellow man. So let that be an explanation. But like I said, that part of the world has been a civilization much longer than this part of the world that we see from our perspective. And from the movie V for Vendetta, in the whole Guy Fawkes conspiracy that happened in Europe, where this man and his cult or coalition set up some strategy to assassinate the king who they disagreed with. It's ironically my birthday, November 5th. Remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. When I saw that movie, I was just like, wow, this movie's already my favorite because it's my birthday. But that rhyme followed me to the point where when the first one of my friends got an iPhone and showed me what this world of apps, applications and stuff was, he used this previous life app where he just told me, I got this app. It's a previous life. So you just, you know, give it your birthday and then it'll tell you what and who you were in your previous life or lives. And I was like, this is what apps are? Okay. I gave him my birthday, November 5th. And sir, he just reads, 400 years ago, you were a noble, humble, loyal rice farmer in Korea who, because of your loyalty and admiration for the king, will you be blessed in this lifetime and the next after. Like, just and it was a point in my life where I was questioning, like, why am I just so blessed? Like, why did I get to have my parents and my neighbors have the parents who beat their child because they found out that their child lost a fight? And it wasn't even if I kicked him in the nuts. But yeah, this is a true story that just, the way that I had to physically learn and experience racism, because my parents didn't teach me any of that. My father told me I am an American. That makes me different from immigrants that come to this country. Not that I'm better, but I cannot believe that just because I look like immigrants, that I'm any different from anyone else who is born in this country, like you, sir, like your son, any other politician. That was the one value that I'm so grateful my father made sure he instilled in me. I am no better, yet no different from any other native-born American. Granted, because of who my parents are, I do understand and recognize and rationally explain to people I am entitled to certain inalienable rights endowed to me by my creator. I have to tell this to my tenants that, hey, I'm the landlord's son. I can come around here and talk to you like, hey, dude, how are you doing? But when my tenants come to me and say, hey, my dude, immediately I had to sit there and check them, sir, and say, I have to remind you that I am not your dude. I can call you my dude. I can call you my dude. But for you to call me your dude makes me feel like you have forgotten the relationship that I am going to be the future lord of the land that your business is on. And I always try to just explain it in a biblical sense, whether people may be atheists or not. But I just try to find a common, conscious line of speech where God is love. So whenever I use the word God, I do it in a sense where it's love, to the point where I've even evolved where God is an acronym of things I love. Giving out donations, going out daily, guiding our destitute, getting over darkness. Do you understand what I'm saying, sir? So there's a vast difference between my personal way of how I would have handled this. So this first question right there, I would have told him, let me correct you, anytime, including our country, has nuclear weapons in their arsenal, the world is at constant threat. I would just correct him and let him go into...
How realistic is it, do you think, that Putin would use a tactical nuclear weapon?
Well, I don't think he will, but I think it's irresponsible for him to talk about it. The idea that a world leader of one of the largest nuclear powers in the world says he may use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, and the whole point I was making was it could lead to just a horrible outcome. And not because anybody intends to turn it into a world war or anything, but it just, once you use a nuclear weapon, the mistakes that can be made, the miscalculations, who knows what would happen.
What is the red?
And this is where, if you're listening to how President Putin is explaining this, he continuously focuses on the fact that the United States of America was the first country in the world to use a nuclear weapon, which set the precedent for this moment that we're in. So we are the guilty ones, sir. That's him and pretty much the EU saying, we are the ones who did this technology. How? We took the smartest, brightest scientists from that world war that we called evil and rebranded these men into heroes. Werner von Braun is one of the classic makeover stories where here's this Nazi scientist who clearly was one of the key factors that advanced Nazi technology to the point where their rockets and their planes were just so much more advanced. And until we got those scientists and had them expunged or forgiven of war crimes so that they would help us fight the war against the evil which we were facing, which was true evil, just the genocide of people because of whatever rationality Hitler had at that time. In a nutshell, this is where I look at the movie The Dictator between Charlie Chaplin and then just looking at Hitler, and I ask myself, who came first, Charlie Chaplin or Adolf Hitler? Clearly, Charlie Chaplin, the dictator, came out first. Adolf Hitler imitated this man in the mannerisms. If I translated his speeches where, I guarantee myself it will translate in the same kind of unifying sense of Charlie Chaplin's first ever audio debut, where he talks about the goodness of mankind and the need of the fact that this technology that connects us so much quicker cries out for just brotherhood and the goodness in man, sir. So again, here's how you go into this. Biden on Putin crossing a red line. I look at these little banners as well, and I don't know, like,
Line for the United States and NATO, and have you directed the Pentagon and other agencies to game out what a response would be if he did use a tactical nuclear weapon, or if he bombed the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, or anything along those lines?
There's been discussions on that, but I'm not going to get into that. It would be irresponsible of me to talk about what we would or wouldn't do.
Have you asked the Pentagon to game it out, though? I mean, just in case?
The Pentagon didn't have to be asked.
So French President Macron told me that he does.
And this is where I can interpret that. And if I put myself in a position of Trump and his thing, trying to get whatever piece of dirt from whatever you say, President Biden, so that we could weaponize it to use against you in the midterm election. Okay, so when you just said,
in case?
The Pentagon didn't have to be asked.
what does that exactly mean? Because I can definitely see the media and all the extreme politicians, whether they call themselves Republican or Democrat, left or right, the extremes who don't care about the future and safety of the entire world. They only are focused on making sure our country is the best and always the best, and any kind of superpower, even if we owe them trillions of dollars and a big thank you for helping us just with that loan. But instead we talk about them as just, again, the worst people. But yet so many of their people are our people in our country, listening directly to our friends and neighbors and our TV screens, talking about how our ancestry, and when I say our, I just mean the Asian people, I guess, in this sense, is that, yeah, we are a hop, skip, and a jump away before Asians are back to the Chinese Exclusion Act, where it's just like, yes, just get rid of all of them. Just, this is where the grand experiment, sir. I'll send you the clip of that. Listen to that. We are just repeating the same experiment. And when I say we, I mean just the leaders who are running this world taking the citizens of the world that they are leading with them to a black hole where we are on the event horizon. And when I say we, I am including myself in this room, this map room. This is my thought experiment. Just like Einstein imagined himself riding a beam of light. The mindset I'm in is that I am in this room with you and all the members of this National Defense Strategy team explaining this. I really get engulfed in this.
So French President Macron told me that he doesn't think that Putin is acting rationally. And he said that he thinks a lot of this is because of how isolated Putin was for 2 years during the pandemic. And others who have...
Okay, now if we use this as a Mad Lib and we just said French blah, blah, blah is saying Biden is not acting rationally because of isolation during COVID. Okay, so we got two versions here. This is where I always, can I put my name in that same thing and not feel guilty? This is where I tell people, like, the one you point a finger, you got to be able to address these three fingers pointing back. So, sir, what would you feel if that was the question in the interview? French blah 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 is saying President Biden is not actually acting rationally, and it could be due to isolation from COVID, which many of our media analysts here in our country are already saying, which is in turn opening this door for the rest of the world media to speak about their leaders and their countries and nations' issues in the same manner, except for these communist countries where that kind of rhetoric is forbidden and will be punishable. And this is where, in a sense, so many Americans hear any kind of praise towards communist ideology and they're just like, oh, you're a communist. It's just like, I'm not a communist. I'm just saying I can see the good from communism. Okay? Like, geez. So that's the one. Maybe you're something. What are you? You're a fascist. You are a not see. You can't see beyond what your mind immediately puts in your head. Just like when the serpent comes to Eve and just says, did God really say you cannot or you can eat of all the fruit? And Eve rationally explains to the serpent, no, God said we can't eat of all this fruit, but this one tree we cannot even touch, or else we will surely die. To which the serpent replies, you will not die. God knows the moment you eat from this tree, you will be like gods, and your eyes will be open to be able to see the difference between good and evil. Now, I'm adding a lot of phrasing into that, but we all know that story. And then what happens? Eve goes through the rationality that, okay, yeah, this is good for the eyes and it's good for food. And if it's good for wisdom to make us smarter and more like God. Okay? And then, hey, Adam. And then she just gives it to Adam and he takes a bite. So this is where I'm just like, so immediately after she gains this ability to see the difference between good and evil, she does not see the evil of just handing her husband or her brother or whoever you want to make this relationship, the evil and just eat this, knowing that before she came into existence, he was told, stay away from that. And this is where I have to question, why was Eve at this tree? And because clearly to me, she's at this tree already touching this fruit. This is my psychological explanation of the story and the moral lesson behind this. It's just clearly Adam was not looking out for Eve. Or perhaps Adam just got sick of staying away from this tree and got sick of Eve and just said, hey, Eve, Go walk over there to that tree. I can map out and list out so many different game scenarios depending on how I want to strategize and use that to get to my point. To which, again, sir, I don't know if the point of this interview was to help calm just the spiritual, I guess, anxiety created by your statement that you know this man very well and he is very capable of using nuclear weapons if he continues to hear how terribly his efforts and his people and his army is failing. I took that as just like a warning to the media analysts who are just doing this. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, but as I progressed in this interview
with him, Condi Rice and Bob Gates and James Clapper have used words like erratic and unhinged to describe Putin's behavior today. Do you think Putin is a rational actor?
I think he is a rational actor who's miscalculated significantly.
Okay, so this is where I say you're in the right step. You didn't call him the enemy. You didn't say he's irrational. You said, I think he's a rational person who just miscalculated. I think
he thought, you may recall, I pointed out that they were going to invade, that those 100,000 or more troops there, and no one believed that he was going to invade Ukraine. You listen to what he says.
So listen to what you just said. You predicted this. And, it's just like, the best way I can put it is when you say that and hear yourself say that, are you trying, or do you hear how you sound like you're just trying to put yourself that much higher on the pedestal on Donald Trump or whatever, like.
Listen to the speech he made after, when that decision was being made. He talked about the whole idea of he was needed to be the leader of Russia that united all the Russian speakers. I mean, I just think it's irrational.
So if he's not rational and
no, I didn't say he's not rational.
You said the speech is wasn't
I think the speech is
okay.
And this is where I admire you just correcting. No, that's not what I said. Let's set the record straight. So I feel like this was kind of a lesson that you were able to take away from our conversations.
His objectives were not. I think he thought, Jake. I think he thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms. That this has been the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and he was going to be welcomed. And I think he just totally miscalculated.
So you talked about this a few days ago, the search for an off-ramp for him, because his back is against the wall. There are questions about how rational he is. He already was a brutal dictator. What is the off-ramp? Is there any acceptable way that he can leave, in his mind, without seizing territory in a way that would not be acceptable to Ukraine?
I don't know what's in his mind. Clearly, he could leave. He could just flat leave and still probably hold his position together in Russia. The idea...
Okay, so that statement right there, you don't know what's on his mind, but you rationally express that he could leave at this moment and still hold his position. But then later you tell John and all of us watching what you'll do if he does step down and say, okay, I'm going to leave this war, I'm going to take this exit ramp.
That he's been able to convince the significant of the Russian people that this is something that...
Now, when you say the Russian people, you do have to understand that there are Russian people here in America who call themselves Russian Americans. This is where you just put your first line and divided a group.
He thought made sense, but now he's accomplished what he wanted to do, and it's time to bring Russians home.
Would you be willing to meet with him at the G20?
Look, I have no intention of meeting with him, but...
And that right there is a huge strike. One strike, two to Putin. Here we go. He doesn't have any intention nor any compassion to just approach Putin with a look, as crazy as this sounds, if I, when I say I, just speaking as President Biden, if I requested to sit down between you, President Zelensky, me, and from one of the interviews of a Russian analyst explaining to Fox Putin's true intention behind all this, to which she says they are really looking for this sit down between you, President Zelensky, President Putin, and she specifically said, and an adult in the room who can maintain order. And this is where, sir, would you say you don't feel anybody is capable or qualified to initiate negotiations between this? This is where I feel like I'm capable of saying I will take that challenge, sir.
For example, if he came to me at the G20 and said, I want to talk about the release of Griner, I'd meet with him. I mean, it would depend, but I can't imagine.
So right there, you're telling me and Putin and the whole world that you don't want to sit down and talk to him about how to solve this Ukraine. The only situation that you can envision talking to him at this G7 meeting is if Putin came up to you and only came up to you to talk about the release of Griner. I don't know who Griner is. This is what a rational, conscious human being, a quantum computer who is trying to give you this upgrade to turn you from a classical thinking president to more of a quantum visionary president that we need right now, like the Kennedy. Like I said, it's just sometimes you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's just nothing against that. Again, take that how you... Are you calling me old? Are you calling me a dog? This is where I just use those words and say, I didn't call you any of that. It's just...
Look, we've taken a position. I just did a G7 meeting this morning. The idea, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So
what does
I'm
that
not
mean?
about to, nor is anyone else prepared to negotiate with Russia about them staying in Ukraine, keeping any part of Ukraine, etc. So it would depend on specifically what he wanted to talk about. But look, he's acted brutally.
If you're asking me what I would want to talk about in this meeting, President Biden, I would answer just a private sit down on just how we are going to work together on just... Because, sir, you are, again, you have just as dirty hands as you are accusing Putin and all Putin imitators, Trump imitators. You are guilty of the same crimes. If you want to say here in this interview, telling Putin that, yeah, you are going to prosecute him for war crimes. You haven't said it yet, but you told him this is, yeah, he could sit down and leave right now. And then you just tell him, you do that, I'm going to come get you. I'm going to put you in war crime jail. I'm going to make your people. So right there, you already tarnished that option. If, you know, which I know Putin just like the woke, just the stories that I hear of these children who have to confide in the government who was trying to help them figure out their identity against their parents who are telling them, like, no, don't believe that, treating their children as if they were property or slaves, like communist China. You know, it's just, there's no difference. It's people try to look at it as apples and oranges. It's literally apples. It's just a green apple versus a red apple versus a Macintosh versus. It's just, sir, we need change. Change like the change and the way that your former president, who when you served under him, rode that platform, unifying. It's on all of us to bring about this change, not rely on the Democrats we vote for or the Republicans that. It's like, it's on us. You were part of that. And then I just didn't understand why you weren't the one to take precedent. You know, George Washington's vice president was John Adams. And then after that, it seemed like they developed a system where the vice president was essentially being groomed to be the next president to succeed the predecessor, to which that vice president would then follow suit until it got to Thomas Jefferson, to which Thomas Jefferson did not follow that model. He said no. And then he was this, like, this is kind of off topic, but then on topic with the coin, all Washington, Jefferson, Eisenhower, all their faces all faced to the left, facing the left. And when I looked up the history, I found out that in British coins, that any change of monarchy, so when Queen Elizabeth II, God rest her soul, took the crown, the face direction changed from her predecessor, her father. And then when America was formed, it was a whole new thing, and that's why our currency begins facing the opposite direction that the King of England was. That this is just my understanding of that. And so then when I looked at the 2022 circulation quarter and I saw that George Washington's face was now facing the same direction as Abraham Lincoln, which was the only president on any current coin facing the opposite direction as all the other faces on our currency. Does this make sense? And I just looked at this, like, what is this symbolizing? And then when I put these things, I feel like this is all like the national treasure clue game that our founding fathers knew had to be solved at a certain time when it needed to be solved by a figure like Jesus Christ, a Messiah who has been just dedicated to just love and bringing unity and groomed to be able to speak in this manner to do so. So when I hear you say, like,
He's acted brutally, etc. So it would depend on specifically what he wanted to talk about. But
I just look at, like, okay, if he was talking about me and I'm putting this, it's just, yeah, I told you I think on Jesus Christ, but I'm here. Look, I'm explaining all of this, sir. This is all just an example of how quantum, this new generation of non-binary, the ones and zeros and twos, that the opposers of the woke agenda or the woke ideology that the far left is trying to push on our children, that argument has to be squashed by an explanation from POTUS saying that this is all part of the greater good. You have to understand that the sooner children are able to just grasp that men and women aren't different from each other, aside from physical differences, they'll be able to be better prepared to speak in this language that isn't so hypocritical, saying, I believe we all came from one species, but Asians and then blacks. And it's just like, whoa, that doesn't sound like somebody who thinks that we are all one people. Does that make sense? It literally is a mindset, sir.
He's acted brutally. He's acted brutally. I think he's committed war crimes, so I don't see any rationale to meet with him now.
When people hear the word Armageddon, they get scared. Used by a U.S.
Yeah.
president, they get scared. Do you think in any way discussing this type of thing publicly, openly, Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons, might have the opposite effect of what you want? It might make some of our wobblier European allies be even more scared of confronting Putin.
Well, no, I don't think so at all. I think, look, it was a directed, when I'm talking about, I'm talking to Putin. He, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon as if that's a rational thing to do. Mistakes get made.
And this is where the hypocrisy comes in, where all I've heard the response from our military is that if Putin does use nuclear wars, then we as a country will retaliate. So it's just, sir, what you just said is exactly what you are accusing Putin. Just like in the Bible, everyone will be judged according to the way they judge everyone else.
And the miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
And you still are afraid of that, though, that it could.
Well, no, I don't think any rational person saying the initial use of a nuclear weapon, killing thousands of people, does not have the prospect of leading to something that can be way out of control.
Let's turn to Saudi Arabia. Some of your Democratic allies on Capitol Hill are afraid that the U.S. got played.
It's not irrational to state that. But that's not the end of the conversation right there. That's not a final answer. The answer should be, that being said, it's imperative to do whatever we, when I say we, I'm talking about our executive branch, do to put aside our differences and our things, just to have a sit down, a peaceful attempt at a sit down conversation, just to say, look, instead of an off ramp, let's build an on ramp so that these communist countries can find themselves on the highway towards the greater good that the UN and stuff stands for. Putin's not looking for an off-ramp. He wants the on-ramp that his country, his people, just like China and their people and North Korea and their people, deserve to be welcomed with open arms on this highway that we, the Western United Nations, finds ourselves on. Because the way I see it in this metaphor is just that we as a country, the United States, feel that we are the construction managers and planners, not only here on this side of the world, but on that side of the world now too. Okay? So anything Europe wants to do, they have to get permission from us first, when we are the children of that part of the world. So again, imagine Hunter coming up to you and be like, no, Pop, I went out there, I did this and and I'm going to tell them. It's just, you got to put yourself in the same perception, because words like fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives, sir. And from a psychological personality perspective, we all have the perspective of the parent, the child, and the adult.
When you went to Saudi Arabia and fist bumped with the Crown Prince, because now, obviously, a few months later, Saudi-backed OPEC is slashing oil production in partnership with Russia. The chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Menendez, just called for a freeze on cooperation with Saudi Arabia, including most arms sales. Senator Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, says the Saudis sided with Russia against the United States. Do you think it's time for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, and by the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to one about oil. I went about making sure that we made sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East and what was going on. And by the way,
So then why can't you do the same thing with Putin to show that you're not going to walk away from the people in Ukraine who just want peace? They don't want any more Russians to die or any more weapon aid per se at this point. They would love for you, President Biden, to come in and be like, I'm going to try this peaceful negotiations through language.
Today, I just got off the telephone with the president I got off the phone with the prime minister of Israel and the president of Lebanon. They've worked out a deal. They've been at war, declared war with one another for a long time. They've worked out a boundary relationship
So again, right here, it sounds like you were setting this up as you are taking credit for these peace negotiations we were hearing about the Vatican coming out, crying out for just a unified religion or a two-party state in Israel. To me, from my perspective, I'm just hearing it and it's coming off like, oh, our president thinks that it's him who is responsible for all this stuff. Just like Donald Trump says, I brought lower gas prices and a better economy. So I'm just putting this into perspective, sir, to give you an understanding of what I meant.
and the Eastern Mediterranean for oil. Then they're going to make an agreement that is historic. We also got overflights for Israeli planes over Saudi Arabia. We got movement in terms of how we would deal in the Middle East with aggression from Iran. But it wasn't, there were eight other parties there. It wasn't about oil.
Okay, but
But we should.
There were 8 other parties there, yet you seem to take full credit without acknowledging the other 8 parties. So 9, G7, I don't know, like, what do these numbers mean anything? So again, just black and white understanding from a logical comprehension of this. What you just said is exactly how I explained. Is you took all the credit and then acknowledged that there are 8 other people who are part of this, but do you say they also deserve the credit?
Should, and I am, in the process when this House and Senate gets back, they're going to have to. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with Russia.
What kind of consequences? Menendez says suspend all arms sales. Is that something you'd consider?
I'm not going to get into what I'd consider and what I have in mind. There will be consequences.
The midterm elections are 4 weeks from today. The economy remains top of mind for voters. JP Morgan Chase CEO said the U.S. is likely to enter a recession in the next 9 months. Bank of America says the U.S. could start losing 175,000 jobs a month. Gas prices are on the rise again. Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No. Look, they've been saying this now. Every 6 months they say this. Every 6.
Again, I know exactly why you're saying no, because you are trying to focus on the midterms. Okay? This is where completely the carrot that was in front of you, President Biden, at the beginning of this interview just switched to something else donkeys like to chase after.
Once they look down the next 6 months and see what's going to happen. It hadn't happened yet. It hadn't. There's no guarantee that they're going to be. I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is.
In Genesis, on the 7th day, God rests from all his work. That, sir, is a lesson that you should always be prepared for at least one day that we will not be blessed by the tidings and all the blessings we as a country take clearly for granted. Being baby formula for our newborns, the necessary food and the ability to afford the food. There are so many various issues that are being focused on by politicians using these buzzwords of economy and inflation and immigration and Ukraine and Russia. These are buzzwords, as a comedian, I just know gets a certain reaction or puts a listener into a certain frame of mind, like a misdirection a magician uses, just to, whether it's intentional, subconscious, unconscious, or consciously premeditated to induce this. But it shields people from seeing the full truth. And this is why I say I'm trying to do this thing where I know the next president has to be more like me than like more of the politicians that we have. That's all I'm going to say. You guys take that how it is. It's just what I 100% believe. And I believe that because I have no sin in this. I am not a politician. I've never been a politician. So no citizen, no media person can accuse me, if I were president, of having any involvement of contributing or being a cause of any of this today. This is why yes, I'm free of that sin. You can't say, oh, well, back in, when you were, it's just, I'm a Democratic Republican. I've never voted. Like I said, I've relied. It's just, attack me with whatever kind of attack I've been hearing media or other politicians use against each other to just forward this selfish campaign to power over control in this country. And that truly is what, again, President Biden, if you want a serious ultimatum, do you want to be the president who isn't the one where the American people said, yeah, we're going to exercise our right of the Declaration of Independence and say, we are going to issue a new form of government. We are at that pinnacle of society. Now, prudence indeed has shown that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. This is all foreseen. It's all history repeating itself, sir. That's why it's imperative for you to listen to that great experiment video that I am linking with this.
We'll move down slightly. Well, look, think about what's happened. We have done more. We're in a better position than any other major country in the world, economically and politically. We still have real problems, but look what we got done. We passed so much legislation that significantly makes a point about, for example,
and that,
the American Rescue Plan, the legislation.
I can only imagine what all the
Look
right.
what we got done. We passed so much legislation that significantly makes a point about, for example, the American Rescue Plan, the legislation to deal with inflation, the Inflation Act. We moved along. I mean, there's so much that's been accomplished that the idea that there's an automaticity to recession is just not there. They've been predicting this off and on for the last.
But you just said that a slight recession is possible.
It is possible. Look, it's possible. I don't anticipate it. What I do think, look, we talk about the impact on.
If you say something is possible, then you are, in a way, anticipating it. So this is the same thing where it's like, I'm not a racist, but da-da-da-da-da. Or it's the same.
The families they have reason to be concerned about energy prices. They have reason to be concerned about a whole range of issues. But look what we've done. We've been able to, the Inflation Reduction Act,
And who's we? Is it your administration? Is it your party? Is it we as a country? Sir, this is where we don't know who we is when you're talking about we.
Look, I know I always quoted my dad, but my dad used to say, what is there any breathing room for a middle-class family? And the breathing room is after all the bills are paid at the end of the month, they have anything left. And there's more than one way to bring down the monthly cost for people who in fact are struggling.
This is where, as an American coming from immigrants, where we were just raised, if we are at a point at the end of every month where our bills are paid and all that's taken care of, that in itself is a blessing. And anything extra left over should be treated as a gift from God or the system our government had put in place to make this extra enjoyable income possible. This is where
To make sure they have the ends meet and they have enough money. And that's what we've done with the Inflation Reduction Act. Look, we've reduced drug prices. We've allowed, for the first time, we've been trying for years.
But then we hear all this argument about fentanyl. So how is reducing drug prices here going to eliminate the fentanyl epidemic?
To get Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices. We pay the highest drug prices of any nation in the world, any major nation. They're going to be in a situation where no senior is going to have to pay more than $2,000 a year for the drugs, no matter how much they cost. We've reduced.
And again, our goal as a government taking care of its people should be that seniors who need medication don't have to worry about paying anything for their necessary prescriptions. Which is why the universal health care that President Obama introduced, that idea of this is what is needed. This is what government should be doing, looking out for the universal, equitable needs of each individual citizen. As unfair as that may come off, it's one standard, one resource for our country nationwide. You can rely on the American government, if you are an American citizen, to take care of you now more than ever. Granted, the American government has had the reputation with the American people that they served as a very shady, underhanded deal. But in this great reset, which everybody's pushing for on that side of the world, it's just a clean slate, okay? And from this day on, we will put ourselves up for judgment by whoever the jury may be. This is the mindset our leader, you, sir, have to be the firm voice, and just instead of following answers to the questions that are thrown at you, you just got to take control of whatever narrative they throw at you and be focused on one thing. I'm only here to talk about what I said about Armageddon. All his questions about this is not my focus for this interview. I want to make this clear about Armageddon. If you want to talk to me, Tapper, about my midterm thing, we'll set up another interview. This is the kind of stance and leadership and example the world leaders, people are begging to see from the American president of the United States, the leader of the free world, which is you, sir.
They're going to make sure that nobody has to pay more than $35 a month for insulin, et cetera. So there's so much to be done. And the same with on energy. We passed look, what I ran on, I said we're going to deal with energy.
Right.
And the energy problem, we're going to deal with the whole notion of global warming. We passed $368 billion worth of help, which...
To which, from earlier, it sounds like you just traded off relying on Russia to just opening up ties with Arab nations. Like,
As the same bankers talk about, it's going to bring $1,700,000,000 off the sidelines in investment. Look what's happened. Look at the investment that's going on in America right now.
Yeah. So I think Democrats have something to run on.
Oh, I think we do. I know we do. And here's the contrast. We know what's the Republican platform to run on? What are they running on? What are they for? They want to put Social Security on the chopping block every 5 years, and the other leader comes along and says, no, every year it should be up for grabs. Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, these aren't negotiable items in terms of whether they're going to continue them or not. The first thing they said they're going to do is get rid of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so what's that do? They're going to raise drug prices, raise medical costs again, be sure that we're going to...
Again, you're answering the questions right here. This is how the American people are viewing this next election. If we vote in Trump or another Trump supporter or whatever, that extremist, we as a people know it's just going to be another, like you said, term of eliminating everything that you accomplished in your administration and term, sir. This is why, yes, every time Democrats take over the presidency for 2 terms and then a Republican comes in, essentially what they do is take the country one step back by eliminating all the things that they disagree with that the predecessor put in. This is why we haven't advanced with our 2-party system. It's not that the 2-party system failed. It's the fact that the 2-party system is fighting against each other to lead our country that is the cause of our country as a society's retardation of being able to just sophisticate to be able to develop our minds and our conduct and our words to align with who we claim and shout to the world that we are. We are the best superpower, and anybody who tries to threaten us as another superpower will be treated like we're going to try to treat China or Russia. So don't even think about becoming another superpower. So this is where, if I started putting myself as the leader of a European EU nation, where I would say to my EU boards, like, America seems on a ego trip, and perhaps maybe we, and when I say we the EU, should do our own little invitation to Putin, just get this thing, which I feel they already did, and now they're waiting to make their final stance on, is America consciously mature enough to understand that we are just as a big of a problem as any other country that we blame or is being blamed. We're no superior. This is where I feel like if we, through our leaders, through one voice, unify our language into a message saying, look, we're no longer trying to make this graven image for ourselves that we're the best and will always be the best. We've matured and we're ready to work as a worldwide team of nations to get us to the next step of human evolution, which is essentially probably terraforming another planet and colonizing space, right? Which, if it's going to be a space race, that's going to slow things down. How much quicker can we bring this if we had Russia and China space teams working together rather than like on the Netflix series Space Force, where, as comical as it is the road that looks like we're gonna head down. It's just ridiculous, sir. And then we get into the part about Hunter.
No longer be able to have the ability to have tax credits for weatherizing your home, saving
Right.
money. I mean, I don't know what they're for.
Our reporting, CNN's reporting, and the Washington Post reporting suggests that prosecutors think they have enough to charge your son Hunter for tax crimes and a false statement about a gun purchase. Personally and politically, how do you react to that?
First of all, I'm proud of my son. This is a kid who got, not a kid, he's a grown man. He got hooked on, like many families have had happen, hooked on drugs. He's overcome that. He's established a new life. He is, I'm confident that he is, what he says and does are consistent with what happens.
Okay, so by those words, if he was doing all these things on this laptop in Russia and in China in this phase of life where he got himself out of that dark period in his life. So now this is the new Hunter, the more refined, more mature Hunter who got over this thing, has the support of his father. His father, who is now president of the United States, has appointed him as this position in foreign relations. And from the evidence of this laptop appears, I've defended where, like, how do we know this is really Hunter or that this is the... I've tried to defend it, but it's hard, sir. So this is where the argument of the accusation where you're the one behind, Merrick Warren's decision to send the FBI against Mar-a-Lago, against Trump. It's just, if the American people don't see Hunter Biden facing the same punishment process of being brought in front of the FBI and all this investigation and then brought and summoned by the Supreme Court, if that doesn't happen just as the same as you want to see it happen for Donald Trump, you've already lost more trust from the people. A rational, candid world.
For example, he wrote a book about his problems and was straightforward about it. I'm proud of him. He came along and said, by the way, this thing about a gun, I didn't know anything about it, but turns out that when he made my application to purchase a gun, what happened was I guess you get asked, I don't guess, you get asked the question, are you on drugs, you use drugs? He said no. And he wrote about saying no in his book. So I have great confidence in my son. I love him, and he's on the straight and narrow, and he has been for a couple of years now, and I'm just so proud of him.
And that's all great. He may be on the straight and narrow in the eyes of his father and his family. But right now you have to understand that in the public eye, the straight and narrow is a very crooked, winding road that's appearing behind him and now being portrayed as the road in front of him and his father and all that stuff. They're just a bunch of crooked people who use their power to take out their enemies, like the former President Trump, who, if he was in power, none of this would have ever happened, which I'm just like, really? Yeah, I'm sure we would have faced a whole nother set of problems to which I don't even want to think about what that would be. So it's just like, yeah, we could say that, but Trump, I can tell you, you cannot make that argument. Just as I'm sitting here telling you, sir, you cannot make this argument.
You're about to turn 80 next month. Happy birthday.
To which I forgive. Please forgive me, because I thought in the other video you were turning 90. And I said you were 20 years Putin senior, to which you were only 10 years, a decade, and 30 years my senior, and about 20 years. So we have decades, generations between the four of us here.
At a time. Whenever anyone raises concerns about your age, you're the oldest president in the history of the United States, you always say, watch me. Voters have been watching you. Democratic voters approve of the job you're doing. Democratic voters overwhelmingly like you. But one poll shows that almost 2/3 of Democratic voters want a new nominee in 2024, and the top reason they gave was your age. So what's your message to Democrats who like you, who like what you've done, but are concerned about your age and the demands of the job?
Well, they're concerned about whether or not I can get anything done. Look what I've gotten done. Name me a president in recent history that's gotten as much done as I have in the first 2 years. Not a joke. You may not like what I got done, but the vast majority of the American people.
President Obama, President Clinton, and then this is where you throw it
do like what I got done. And so it's a matter of, can you do the job? And I believe I can do the job. I've been able to do the job. I've gotten more done. I got the Inflation Reduction. I got all these pieces of legislation passed. And I ran on that. I said this is what I was going to do. And I'm still getting it done. We've got, dealing.
You did not run on the fact that you said that you were going to enact an inflation act. You stood firm that you were going to tackle climate on this green initiative. So right here, this is where your parent, child, adult are all separated, sir.
Making sure that veterans get compensated for
Burn pits.
the burn pits, making sure that we're in a situation where we finally have action on guns. And by the way, I'm going to get this.
So these crimes of war that we as a country have put upon ourselves, these types of war crimes.
Weapons ban. Before this is over, I'm going to get that again. Not a joke. And watch. And so I just think there's it's a matter of, has anybody done more in the first 2 years of their administration for a guy who was, they've been saying this about my age since I began to run. Mm-hmm. And so, you come work out with me.
So right there, that claim, name me one president my age, knowing that I'm the oldest president, who has done more in the first 2 years of it's just that claim right there, you're wording, yes, clearly that can only be President Biden. That doesn't fool today's voter into believing that makes one qualified to be president of these United States in 2024, if not sooner. We are in a mode, and the further Democrats continue to just try to find the same type of politician from their consulting agencies that they hired, who find these politicians like all these Hispanic Republican women who are now being groomed to help weaponize, be weapons against the Democratic. Like, this is all the war game strategy, sir. I mean, am I off base on this?
Morning.
Anytime. The big question, of course, is when you're going to make an official announcement about whether or not you're going to run for 2024 for re-election. Do you think you'll make a decision before the end of the year?
Well, look, I'm not going to make this about my decision. I'm going to make this about this off-year election. After that's done in November, then I'm going to be in the process of deciding.
Is one of the calculations that you think you're the only one who can beat Donald Trump?
I believe I can beat Donald Trump again.
All right, Mr. President, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And again, right there, that's just assuming that you just want Donald Trump to be your running mate. Sir, this entire interview is not helping that legacy I want you to think about. So please listen to these words very openly, because I speak them with the Holy Spirit, and I hope that they fill you with a Holy Spirit guiding you to self-correct this on your own before you find yourself on the same type of judge and jury in front of the world. That you have openly stated you will make sure Putin will find himself at the end of this Armageddon. So again, thank you, President Biden, for this chance to have this interaction, and to national security strategy analysts behind just this release of that article. I hope that this serves you to really formulate the simplest, most effective answer to this, guys. Like I said, I'm here to support you. I'm not here to try to throw anything under the bus. And again, if I did, please correct me like this. That's not my intent. We're all a team. And like I said, I will post this video with the part 1, the grand experiment video explaining just how history is repeating itself. And I will also add a final video that I just put out for my property, my commercial properties tenants, about this huge crisis we're going to have to deal with as a shopping center, just to help you get a sense of just how you need to train yourself to speak about your future goals, that carrot that you're chasing for us as a country, and show us that you're in alignment with yourself. Not just, if I talk about Ukraine, you're very passionate about Ukraine, but then the minute I talk about, what about are you running here? And then you just talk about all the great things you've done. This is not a rational, mentally healthy person, sir. And I'm not questioning your age, but again, your age may be playing a factor in why I'm seeing what I'm seeing so prevalently in you at this current situation, given the circumstances that this conversation is falling under, if that makes sense. So again, thank you for watching, and I guess thank you for just this probably unintended connection that I have just put myself in to make this video. Again, this is my narcissistic extreme thing. I've accepted it, but like I said, I've reasoned it out to where if you want to call me crazy, I can just defend it as, look, I just mean like this is how I prepare myself. If I were an actor, I'm like a Daniel Day-Lewis. Get off my back. It's just you always have to be prepared to defend what you just said, because who knows what that other side is going to interpret. That's why, again, the keynote is how you just made a point in the beginning where you said, what I said was that he is rational. Not, I didn't say he wasn't irrational. You just made it clear. That was the only time you just stopped and did this, other than, you name me one other president who has done more in their first 2 terms at my age. It's just, there's a huge difference. And again, you have my contact information, and if you have any questions, I assume it'll be channeled through me in the means necessary. So, your humble chaplain, trying to do the best I can to just serve my country and my president and my fellow man, to just give us some kind of hope of this messianic period that I've just been trying to answer, and I realize now that maybe I am the answer. So if you want to go into that, you let me know. But like I said, sir, I will accept that challenge in saying I believe the four of us together sit down can resolve this. And if you just say, no, that's not possible, then it's not possible. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. But I think we can. Putin seems like he thinks we can. If you think we can, Zelensky is praying that we can because he's sick of. It's all on our president to say, I think we can. Just like Donald Trump said, I think we can look at Russia and have a productive relationship. That's one thing President Trump, in my opinion, has kind of outshined your administration on this term. Not to let that be something Trump, which I know he'll probably use, but this next election coming up should not be focused on Biden versus Trump. We got to get over that and say who's going to be the next generation, which I hope I will start winning the support from this administration and my fellow neighbors